Welcome back, Quarantimers. Jack from Conductive Music here, and this week is part 2 where we're going to be putting the finishing touches to our sci-fi movie Soundtrap, which started last week by us editing and recording our own percussion instruments straight from the kitchen. So buckle up and let's head back to Soundtrap to continue our soundtrack. So last week we looked at pitch shifting, editing and fading, but this week we're going to add digital effects to our tracks to create a really industrial sound. We're going to be looking at distortion, equalization, reverb, filters and delay. Don't worry if you don't know what any of these mean, just use your ears to try and hear how they affect the sound. Let's solo this track and we're going to just leave it go round. Okay, so over here, let's go into the effects panel. Now these ones are already set because of this thing here, and I'll just get out of it a second. This voice computer mic enhancer, they are the default effects set on this track. So you can leave them on if you want, but we're actually going to get rid of them. Right, we go back into the effect, and the one I want to start with is this one with classic distortion. Let's add it. And if we adjust things like the tone, it's added a lot more treble to that. So I'm happy with those settings now. I want to add one more effect to it, and it's going to be this room reverb here. Now if you click this drop down menu, I'm going to choose church, which should be a little bit louder sound. I'm going to just increase the amount and have a listen. So let's hear how that works in with the rest of the tracks. Our next task is to use the equalizer to bring out individual frequencies in our track, and this is especially useful for adding bass to a track. The next track I'd like to look at is our bass sound, which we made with the book. So I'm going to solo and I'm going to keep it playing. Now back into our effects panel here. Now we can get rid of this one. This one we're actually going to keep. But can you see here it says low, and these little sliders are very low. We're actually going to increase those. So drag and hold and bring them up. Okay, can you hear that? Hear how the sound's changing slightly. Okay, let's bring out a lot of the lower elements of that sound, which is perfect. What I want next is to add a bit of volume to it. I'm going to increase the reverb on that as well. So let's listen to that within the overall track now. So you can already hear how much more industrial this track is sounding with those few audio effects. Let's look at one last effect here. We're going to apply it to our saucepan sound, which we hit the spoon earlier. Now let's put a solo on. Let's take it back to the start and let's go down to effects. Now we can leave these on at the moment because I don't think they actually make the sound particularly bad. So I'm just going to add an additional effect here. Now what we're looking for here is something called delay, and that's going to add an almost echo, a repeated echo to the track. Now my advice for you is to start, if you go over here to time, the nearer you put it to the left, the quicker the delay is going to be, and let me just show you how that's going to work. Let's just have a listen to the track as it stands now. sounding really good as it is. What about adding some really low synthesizers to really make it sound like a film soundtrack? So I've added a new track here, which is our synthesizer, and I'm going to go to pad sound. For me, I really like this 80s pad. I think it works really nicely for the style of music that we're trying to write. So I'm going to select that. Now the keys I've decided to use are going to just be from this one, which is X on the keyboard, all of the white keys up until N. So if you're a music reader or you recognise these notes, that's going to be D, E, F, G and A. You may want to use this B flat one here, which is down on J. But if you keep it within those parameters, that will help us to make it kind of sound dark and menacing. And that's because these keys neatly outline D minor. Now, you don't need to worry about what that is if you're not sure, but that key will work really nicely with this track. I want a darker sounding, maybe a lower synth for this. So I'm going to click on this track. I'm going to hold the Option key like we did in our last lesson. And then that's going to duplicate that data down here. And those are our notes. Now I want a different sound. So I'm going to click on this tab here and we bring up the instrument. I'm going to go then into pad sounds and let's try some of these other ones alongside it. That's fine, but I actually want this to be an octave lower. So, using a method that we did with the drums earlier, if you go into Edit, and you go down to Change Pitch, and you go down to -12, that will make sure the material is an octave lower. Let's just quickly re-listen to that. There we go, it's worked. And now if we go back into our choice of instrument, we can have a listen whilst that is playing by just pressing down on the keyboard to go through this menu and see if you can find a suitable one. So the sound that I most liked was Space Church. Let's listen to those pads together. And again, I'm going to do something that we did with the drums. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to bring up effects. Now I'm going to add a little bit more bass to this. So I'm just going to bring up our equalizer and I'm going to raise these two at the bottom. There we go. Now let's have a listen with the overall track. We're back to the sci-fi track we had at the very beginning of this tutorial. Let's just have a quick listen. I mean, that does sound very sci-fi, but that's not what I intended. And up here, we've just got a notification it was going to reduce the quality. And that's because it's been slightly overloaded because I've got quite a few tracks here. And I'm going to show you a trick for if that happens. So if you click on these little three icons, see those three dots, if you go down to freeze track, what that does is it's just going to remove it from the processing. You're not going to be able to interact with it that much, but that's okay because actually we just want to listen to it. So I'm going to do that for as many as I can. So the only difference between our track we've just made and this one is that I've put in some sound effects from the loop over here. I'll just show you that. SFX. Let's have a quick listen to those. So let's have one final listen then before we wrap up our tutorial. Well, that's it for today, I'm afraid. I hope you've enjoyed this session and please keep an eye out for future videos and maybe also keep an eye out for that robot too. Once again, take care of yourselves and stay safe.